Hello and welcome to American Friction, the US politics podcast that is really good at being a US politics podcast. And I'm really good at being Jacob Jarvis.
You are. Congrats on that.
Thank
and
you.
I'm only quite good at being Chris Jones, which is me.
Don't be so modest. Maybe you're really good. You
I'm
could
all right.
be really good. Try a little bit harder.
I'll try.
And joining us, of course, it's the person who is the very best at being Nikki McCann Ramirez. It's the one and only Nikki McCann Ramirez. It's Nikki McCann Ramirez. Hi, Nikki McCann Ramirez.
Hi, Jacob Dylan Jarvis.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. So, on this show, we're going to be discussing Trump's big, beautiful bill, which is pretty ugly as far as we can tell. See what I did there?
Yeah, that's very good.
Then we look at how Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis has led the Democrats to do some soul-searching and sparked a ton of MAGA conspiracy theories, which is always nice. Plus, there's more. We'll wrap up other stories you might have missed and answer some listener questions. But before that, Chris.
Hello.
Get silly then.
Get silly then.
Yeah,
That's what we're
come on.
going for. This isn't a great question this week. I'll
Don't
be honest.
Stop underselling yourself. Why are you
I'll
being
be
so
honest.
down?
I kept seeing this big, beautiful bill
Beautiful.
being branded around everywhere. Big and beautiful. That's what Trump calls it.
BBB.
But my question this week is, who is the most beautiful bill? And Jarv,
Okay.
I'm going to go with you first. Who's the most beautiful bill?
So probably Bill Skarsgård's got his
Damn it, that's
cause
what I
for
was
it at
gonna
the
say.
moment. You know, like just he is. But then if I'm thinking about soul and personality, I really like Bill Hader.
Yep.
Pretty cool.
That's a
Bill
good
Hader's
bill.
pretty
Very good. It's a good bill.
If I could take the liberty of calling Will Arnett Bill, because, you know, Bill is just a nickname for William. So
Yeah.
Bill Arnett. Then I like him. I like him a lot. And going back in time, Bill Shakespeare.
Bill
Oh.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, William Shakespeare.
Fuck's sake.
Exactly.
That's very good.
So yeah, thank you. Nikki, what about you?
Well, Skarsgård was mine. And then probably like Bill Murray. I love Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Bill Nye, the science guy, a beloved cultural icon here in the United States. And then, I mean, I guess those are like two really good bills. Do we need more bills?
Yeah, they're fairly solid
Yeah,
bills.
those are
I
solid
mean,
bills.
Bill Murray and Rushmore.
But like the biggest and most beautiful has to be Skarsgård. What is he, like 6 foot a billion?
6 foot a billion, yeah.
And he's beautiful.
That's pretty tall.
That's what he's got on his Hinge profile, is 6 foot a billion. Chris, what about you?
Well, you've ruined it for me a little bit because it was actually a trick question. But I thought Bill was it was like brief for Robert. Yeah, I know I've said brief there, and you're looking at me like an idiot.
No, I thought you were going to go for Billiam. I don't know.
Billiam. No.
Billiam.
Robert.
Robert. Rob.
It's William.
Back in the day, men sometimes would just give themselves names that weren't their name. Like
I'm going to Google it.
my granddad was called John, but that wasn't his name. And I actually don't remember what his real name is. But that was just a thing that kind of posh old
I've
dudes
got
did.
this completely wrong.
Yeah,
I've
no,
got
Bill
this
is short
completely
for
wrong.
William.
Yeah,
No?
Yeah.
We know you have. But anyway,
What's-
so what Rob would
I was
you
going to
like
go
then?
Robert
William.
Pattinson. My own question. I
Okay.
just fucked it up.
Do you know
I'm
what
angry with
Do you know what
myself.
I thought you'd go for?
Go on.
Bill Bo Baggins.
Bilbo Baggins.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Samwise Gamgee's pony. It's called Bill,
Okay.
and he was a good one.
Well, let us know in the comments who your favourite, most beautiful, I don't know, whatever it is,
Big,
Bill
beautiful Bill.
or Robert is apparently.
Or Robert.
according
I
to
don't know.
Chris.
I don't know what's gone wrong in my brain there. But one thing I do know is that you are listening to American Friction right now.
Okay, then. So we make this podcast. Making the podcast takes time and it costs money. So we need money and time back to keep doing it. That's kind of how it works. It's capitalism. I don't like it. If it was up to me, we'd live on a big field. We'd all just share stuff and we'd contribute a lovely podcast for entertainment and you'd give us eggs and beans and grain. But that's not how it happens. That's not how it works. That's not the world. So if you could, in this world, we'd really like it if you'd support us on Patreon. That's the plug this week. I hadn't written the plug, so this is all off the dome.
You're a Democratic millionaire looking to find the next Joe Rogan, it's right here. Give us the money.
Exactly. The next Joe Rogan that's
The
slightly more
liberal
left.
Joe Rogan.
The liberal Joe Rogan is here. So go to patreon.com/American Friction.
What are you making from eggs, beans, and grains?
Food.
Oh, I know it's
Just
food, Job.
food.
Eggs,
Huevos
beans, and
rancheros
grains.
with a side of beans? I don't fucking
exactly.
know.
People do stuff back in the day. They just
Eggs,
ate
beans,
stuff.
and grains.
But
Mm-mm.
anyway,
You wouldn't
right, let's...
survive. Chris wouldn't survive a day in the wilderness.
No, absolutely. It'd be like, where's my white monster?
You watch.
Anyway,
The-
let's
The lean
wind it back
times
a little
would
bit.
kill this man.
Let's wind it back. See, look, guys, we all need lots of stuff, as you can tell. Maybe we need something to help us focus, and your Patreon support could help us buy that.
Yes.
So go to patreon.com/American Friction. Chris, what will they get?
They'll get the episode first, ad-free, and access to some big, beautiful merch.
Beautiful merch. We've got a chat community. You can ask us questions, and we put out bonus content. So we love you. Go to patreon.com/American Friction. There's a link in the show notes. If you can't back us financially, we do get that. We might die, but we get it. Go rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Right. That brings us onto the main show where we are now. So, Nikki, the big, beautiful bill, it's passed. Why was it such a shit show and so difficult to get there? And how narrowly did it pass? How well did it go?
Yeah, so the bill passed Thursday morning, like early Thursday morning before we got set up to record this. We had to edit the script. This has been in the works for months now. As we mentioned in a previous episode, Trump has had the least productive Congress of, I think, I don't want to say any president in history because I don't remember, but like probably in decades. At the 100-day mark, the Republican-controlled Congress had only passed 5 pieces of legislation, which is insanely low for a new president who has uniparty control of both chambers of Congress and the White House, of course. One of the things they kept saying is that all of the legislative package, all of the MAGA legislative package was going to be bundled into this, quote, one big beautiful reconciliation budget bill. See our past episodes for an explanation of reconciliation. The thing is here, you have various competing factions of the Republican Party trying to create a piece of legislation that encompasses virtually everything the government is involved in. So I'm going to just stick to the main holdouts because it's a lot of things. You had some people who thought Medicaid cuts were bad and basically caved as soon as Mike Johnson and Trump were like, oh, we're not touching Medicaid. Because theoretically, they're not directly cutting Medicaid. They're just instituting a bunch of provisions and requirements for Medicaid recipients of the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which is the U.S. equivalent of like food stamps. They're instituting a bunch of requirements that will wind up kicking people off because they no longer qualify for the programs. So instead of a direct cut, they're basically telling, I think the estimate is like 10 million people over the next X amount of years, oh, you no longer qualify. You make too much money. You're not working enough hours, things like that. Once that happened, the people who were worried about the Medicaid cuts went away, or agreed to vote for the bill. There were other people who thought the cuts to social safety net programs. Another major faction were the deficit hawks. This piece of legislation, the reconciliation bill, makes permanent Trump's 2017 tax cuts. And the 2017 tax cuts, as I'm sure people have heard, gave a ton of money to rich people, to the richest people in the United States. They had some marginal benefits for like middle class and low income people, but the version of the bill that is now being passed is going to make those tax cuts for rich people permanent. It's actually going to increase taxes on the lowest income Americans over the next decade or so because they've added provisions that aren't permanent, that if they aren't made permanent, it means poor people are going to be paying more in taxes. And it also creates a multi-trillion-dollar tax deficit for the government. And you have people in the Republican Party who their whole thing is that the national debt is too high and the government needs to be spending less. So these people wanted actual direct cuts to social safety net programs. They wanted deeper, more like blatant hacking and slashing of these very expensive social safety net programs that make up a giant chunk of the federal budget, but are super critical because they're the way millions of like low income people in the United States get access to healthcare in this country. So that was the other one. And then the third major faction were a group of Republicans who were concerned about what are called SALT taxes, state and local taxes, which is a provision that certain states have that you can like deduct your state taxes from your federal taxes. I don't really get it. It's like a really obscure tax code thing that only affected like a dozen Republicans, but they were holding up the entire bill.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's not a tax on salt.
It's
I'm
not a
glad
tax
about
on
that,
salt.
Chris.
Salt is the acronym.
It's a close one.
But
Yeah,
I love salt.
I love salt as
It's
well.
great, isn't
yeah,
it?
Yeah, a
It's
little
really
bit of
tasty.
sort of get it on your finger, just lick it.
Just the finger.
okay, that's
Bit of
weird.
salt.
That's a little
Teaspoon.
odd.
Oh,
Tablespoon.
Me and Chris love salt a lot.
I got salt on my desk.
Quick little plug we got to do, Chris. We speak to someone about Medicaid, don't we?
We did. We spoke to Dr. Celine Gounder, who's a medical expert and a contributor to CBS News when it comes to everything medical related. And she was well, it was very eye-opening, wasn't it,
It
Jarv?
was enlightening.
That's a good
It
word.
was.
That's a great
It
word.
was hard-hitting and enlightening journalism from your boys at American Friction, as always. Trump had to go directly to beg for this to get sorted, didn't he, Nikki? Is he going to really go out for revenge against anyone who tried to block him from being a dictator like he wants to be? Or, I don't know, has he been chastened by this? Has he realised he's a little bit more fallible than he believed?
The bill ultimately passed. It passed by a margin of 215 yes votes to 215 no votes. Given that Republicans have an 8-vote majority, it's slightly unexpected that the margin of passage would be so thin. The reason it played out that way was because several Republicans voted no on the bill for the reasons I just stated. Several abstained. 2 of them accidentally missed the vote. And Democrats currently have 3 vacancies because 3 Democratic members of Congress have died of old age in the last 3 months. So had those seats been filled, at least the first vote of the party might have failed. And it just goes into a lot of other questions one has about like what kind of leverage Democrats have over this kind of legislation. But at the end of the day, Republicans are passing an incredibly unpopular bill that is going to be incredibly damaging for working class families and low income people. And Trump is gloating about it. He was thrilled this morning, Thursday morning, on Truth Social. He is now focusing on the Senate, on getting this passed through the Senate, sent back to the House, passed by the House, and then to his desk. And I think the thing here is Trump, when he visited Congress this week, he called out Thomas Massie, who's like a big deficit hawk member of Congress, was one of the people who was like, we're spending too much money. We need to make more cuts. Said he should be removed from government. So I wouldn't be surprised if Massie gets primaried this next election cycle. But at the end of the day, Republicans are sticking to the agenda. What I will say is that it seems this bill is headed for similar challenges in the Senate. You do have people like Josh Hawley who think doing this kind of thing to Medicaid is politically suicidal, as he wrote in an op-ed for the New York Times earlier this month. So you do have Republican members of the Senate who are looking at this and going, this is an absolutely insane piece of legislation. A lot of them haven't gone public. Hawley has been one of the most public about it, but The Hill reported out Thursday morning that there's a coalition of about 6 or 7 Senate Republicans who are very concerned about this bill. So that might be a new challenge. The Senate is a whole other monster.
Let's just say Josh Hawley as well. He's not a super sensible guy. So, you
No,
know,
not in the
but if he can see this, then maybe that shows it's incredibly silly. Chris, what are the worst things in the bill?
Well, one of the things that I noticed really, Jarv, was the cuts to the SNAP scheme, which Nikki has already outlined what SNAP means. It's very long and not a very interesting name, but it's basically
Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program.
Off the dome. That was brilliant. It's basically food stamps. And what they're aiming to do is cut federal spending on this by about $260 billion over the next 10 years, basically saying that individual states will have to make up the cost of the cuts that the federal government is making it basically harder for states to be able to give food stamps to everyone who needs it. Also, the age bracket is moving quite considerably. Currently, it's people who are able-bodied between the ages of 18 and 54 have to meet work requirements to be able to get these food stamps. That's going to move up to 64. So that's quite a big leap. And essentially what's going to happen here is that states, because they've got to make up this extra amount of cost for SNAP, they're going to make it much harder for people to be able to get onto the scheme. And at a time where, groceries are still very expensive for normal everyday Americans. Eggs are still expensive. Doesn't matter what Trump tells you. They're still expensive. Teetering on the edge of a recession as well. And who knows what's going to happen with the tariffs still.
Yeah.
That could push the US very much into a recession. So at a time where you have all of these economic issues still ongoing or overshadowing everything, making it more difficult for people who are, I guess, lower down on the socioeconomic ladder in America, making it harder for them to get things like food stamps. That seems terrible, and it's going to put a lot of people at health risks.
It's because Trump thinks there's like a magic groceries fairy, though, doesn't he? Groceries. I said
You're really good at saying the word groceries.
Groceries, but yeah, as we've discussed before, he does not understand groceries. That's why he can't possibly care about this, because he's just like, food exists. I have it.
Yeah.
And people make it for me.
I want to touch on this notion that like programs like SNAP are going to be sent back to the states and that states are going to handle it. The reason there are federal programs like SNAP, like Medicaid, like FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that are at a federal level, like the Department of Education, is because the states in the United States do not all operate off equal budgets. The budget of a state like California is like exponentially larger than the budget of a state like Arkansas. And when these programs were created, the idea was that states can pay for some of it. Medicaid has a state supplementing, like portions of Medicaid can be supplemented by states. And that's something that Republicans are also looking to cut in this bill. But the idea was that if through federal taxes, you can create this big pool that states can pull from to ensure that no matter what state you live in, you as an American citizen have access to these social safety net programs. And some of the benefits will vary on a state-by-state level, but only slightly. But the idea here is that if there's a tornado in Mississippi, which is one of the poorest states in the country, they don't wipe out their entire state budget on the damage control and instead can go to the federal government and say, hey, we need assistance here. And Trump is now trying to get rid of FEMA and saying, oh, this will be handled by the states. A state like, I don't know, Oklahoma doesn't need as big of a pool for like hurricane recovery as a state like Louisiana. You don't get wildfires in, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, like California's needs are different than Florida's needs are different than like Maine. And what Republicans are doing here is sacrificing the ability of individual states, a lot of which are red states, to access federal assistance programs that the people in those states would not have access to if they weren't on a federal level. Like, that's why Josh Hawley is saying that these Medicaid cuts are going to be atrocious, because Missouri's one of the states that has a higher Medicaid propensity compared to like the list of all 50 states. They're on the upper level. And Medicaid is also a huge program. Like, its central focus is providing healthcare for low-income children. Some of the highest Medicaid propensity states are Republican states. And what the Trump administration is doing is essentially saying, we're going to cut off the access you have to the biggest funding mechanism you have to ensure that people in your state have access to things like food if they need it, healthcare for their children, and you're just going to have to deal with it.
And just going back to your point on Mississippi as well, Jackson has a pretty serious water supply issue, and I'm pretty sure SNAP covers bottled water. So if people aren't able to get access to simple things like bottled water in Jackson, Mississippi, you're going to have a hell of a problem with people being hospitalized, and then the whole situation is made much worse.
This is all really a bipartisan problem, isn't it? So, on behalf of Nikki, I would just like to say, if you're listening, Josh Hawley, you're welcome on the podcast anytime.
Very nice. That's good.
Anytime you'd like, because it's just an issue that just goes beyond politics, and we have to discuss that with people.
You know what? I would have Josh Hawley on to talk about Medicaid. I would do it.
Okay. Josh, if you're listening, or Gavin, if you're listening and Josh is coming on your... No, because Josh will be going on Gavin's podcast. Gavin Newsom.
I draw the line at Gavin.
But Gavin Newsom could
Why are we calling him Gavin?
Because he's listening in. He knows.
Oh, okay. We're all friends.
Yeah, well... yeah, Gavin, if you could get us in touch with Josh, that'd be great. Anyway, on to some other weird bits. There have been some interesting hearings this week, I will say. Nikki, what's habeas corpus, and why is it worrying that Kristi Noem doesn't have a clue what it is?
Yeah, so habeas corpus is a legal principle that states that, like, you as an individual have a right to contest your detention by, like, a government or power, a sovereign. I believe it actually originated in England. Yeah, the writ of habeas corpus was described in the 18th century by William Blackstone.
Oh, one of our favorite bills. William Blackstone.
That's a very good bill.
A big, beautiful bill.
But essentially, it's like two things here. You, as a person, if you are arrested or detained by a government, have the right to publicly demand that the government answer for your detention, that they give a specific reason as to why you were detained. And that also typically involves, like, having a judge listen to that reason and decide if your detention was lawful. Habeas corpus, I think, stands for, like, you must possess the body, or, like, have the body, like, you must have the person in custody.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's super important because without habeas corpus, without the concept of a writ of habeas corpus, the government, a state, a power can detain you, disappear you, and not ever answer for the reasoning. If that sounds similar to what's happening to migrants in the United States right now, it's like, yes. We've heard Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy White House chief of staff, one of the architects of his immigration policy, publicly say that the administration is looking at suspending habeas corpus, which, if that happens in the United States, it's game over. Like, we're done. Like, if a president... It's happened 4 times in U.S. history, the most famous one being Abraham Lincoln suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War, a time when, like, there was active warfare happening around D.C. and the Capitol, and the United States had basically collapsed. You know, it had it briefly split into 2 separate nations, and the Constitution requires that Congress, because the suspension clause is in Article 1, which governs Congress, that Congress has to approve a suspension of habeas corpus, and they approved it retroactively with Abraham Lincoln. And that's kind of the justification Republicans have been using. It's like, oh, well, Abraham Lincoln did it. Like, Abraham Lincoln ended up having to get approval from Congress anyway. And that's not how it works. It's typically something that is done in times of war. If habeas corpus is suspended, it typically happens because things are so tumultuous that you do not have courts. That, like, a judge cannot get to a courtroom to, like, actually process you or hear detention hearings. If habeas corpus is suspended, it typically means that things have collapsed. And so this whole past week, while Republicans are going through the reconciliation process, you had cabinet secretaries like Kristi Noem, like Marco Rubio, like RFK Jr. showing up to Congress to defend their budget demands for this legislation. And so Kristi Noem is sitting in front of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, and she's asked, what is habeas corpus? And her response, Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, a department that oversees the detention and deportation of, not even like detention, arrest, because it's not just immigration. The department covers a lot of stuff, but they oversee the detention of tens of thousands of people a year. She's asked, what is habeas corpus? A fundamental constitutional right. And she goes, well, quote, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country. And she added that Abraham Lincoln had used it. Maggie Hassan, the senator that had asked her to define it, was just like, stop. You are so wrong. Like, that is not at all what this is. And it just goes to show, like, we already knew Kristi Noem was unqualified, but it's not even that these people think they don't have to respect the law. In some ways, they don't even understand the laws they're violating. They are in charge of ripping people away from their families, holding them in detention, like getting them out of the country, all under the various justifications they've provided that we've talked about extensively on this podcast, many of which violate the laws in and of themselves. In any other administration, if we were not living in a time in the United States where our institutions were fundamentally collapsing before our eyes, the Secretary of Homeland Security getting in front of Congress and saying that the right to habeas corpus was the right the president had to deport people, it would be like, how do we remove this person?
Yeah, it is fucking grim. Chris, in a final shameful, grim moment for now, what went on with Trump and his meeting of the president of South Africa? Because again, that was something.
Well, I'll start this by saying I don't really know what the point was, but maybe someone else can tell me what the point was. But basically, a lot has been happening around the US and South Africa at the moment. We've obviously had the white South African refugees that have gone to the US. And then we had that moment with Grok, the Musk's AI model that was responding to completely unrelated questions with answers, just talking about what it said was white genocide in South Africa. That's a whole thing. I'll leave that there. No one's really sure what's happened.
Just in response to absolutely nothing to do with it.
The questions had no.
Give me a recipe for a cake, and it'd be like, here, so you need some eggs and flour. And also, did you know that the genocide in South Africa?
Someone asked it to speak in a pirate voice, and it responded
in the pirate voice.
Talking about alleged. That isn't alleged because it's not real, white genocide in South Africa. That was a whole thing anyway. Musk says that it was a programming error, but
the error was that they tried to reprogram Grok to spread conspiracy theories about white genocide in South Africa, and they error was that they accidentally made it respond to every question with content about South Africa.
Yeah, they made it too good.
Nikki, reading through the lines there. Yeah. Reading through the lines. Anyway, back to what happened in the White House. Cyril Ramaphosa met with Donald Trump and his delegation, and they had a whole White House, press briefing.
Oval Office meeting.
Oval Office meeting, like we've become so accustomed to.
As far as the eye can see.
And I think it's relatively near the start. Trump throws to a monitor. It's like, watch this. And basically what appears on this monitor is a video that basically, to wrap it up, alleges there is white genocide in South Africa. And Cyril Ramaphosa and his delegation are sat there in the room just incredibly confused about what's going on, why this is happening, because all he can see, he thinks he has a fairly good relationship with Donald Trump. He also pulled out some newspapers, one of which was the Daily Mail, and started reading.
A fine paper.
Very much so. Started reading out some headlines, and I think he was saying death, that all of this is about death, and also pointing towards alleged white genocide in South Africa. All this time, Cyril Ramaphosa, confused, doesn't bite, though, which is important. Doesn't bite, doesn't create the spectacle that Donald Trump is obviously trying to create here. Also, just going back to the newspapers, John Elligan, who's the Johannesburg bureau chief for the New York Times, was there and said that some of these stories that were on the newspapers had nothing to do with murders involving white people in South Africa at all, which is just like, it's really bizarre, the level of incorrectness that was here. And then there was a Johan Rupert, who's a South African billionaire, was also there, and he played a big part in brokering this meeting between the two. He, after watching the video and hearing Trump speak like this, clapped back at Trump, and he said this. He said, "There are too many deaths, but it's across the board," saying that, yes, crime is a massive issue in South Africa, and I don't think anyone in the world would deny that at all. there's a massive issue with crime. What most sane people are saying is that this isn't anything to do with white genocide, and it's pushing this conspiracy theory that's been pushed by right-wing conspiracy theorists across the US for a very, very long time now. But then after all that, apparently the meeting ended quite well, and they had a good chat.
So wrapped up all right.
But it was very strange.
All's
Nikki.
well that ends well, Nikki, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the data shows that like rural crime in South Africa is a problem. Like people do get murdered. But generally, the attention gets placed on white landowners who are either assaulted or killed, when you really have like an equivalent, if not larger, contingency of black farm workers. Way less black people in South Africa own land, especially in rural areas. But studies have found, I think the New York Times put out a review of data between like April of 2020 and March of 2024 that found that South African police had reported 225 farm murders over that roughly 4-year period. 101 of the victims were current or former workers living on farms who are mostly black. 53 of the victims were farmers who are mostly white. So you do have a crime problem in South Africa.
Yeah.
But extremist groups, white nationalist groups, ultra-right groups have for decades now adopted this conspiracy theory that focuses on the attacks against white landowning farmers as a way to claim that there is an ongoing genocide against whites in South Africa and delegitimize the post-apartheid government as an attempt to delegitimize post-apartheid South African governments. And farmers in South Africa will tell you that the conspiracy theory is not true. They'll say the same thing Rupert did. Like, yeah, crime is a problem, but it affects all of us.
Yeah.
Trump got this idea in his head largely because of Elon Musk, because Elon Musk has been pushing this on social media. Trump's media diet at this point is like 8chan level shit. No, truly, he's surrounded himself by ideologues who are like getting their news from the Daily Keck. Like those types of accounts on Twitter. And I just want to contextualize. The video was a video of members of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF party, singing a controversial anti-apartheid song called Kill the Boer. And the lyrics of the song go like, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. They argue that it's an important cultural song because it was an anti-apartheid song, that it was related to like the overthrow of the apartheid government. Other people in South Africa are incredibly critical of it. Ramaphosa was like, in the meeting was like, I totally condemn that. But Trump shows him this video and is like, why is your government okay with this? And the South African president was like, what are you talking about? I'm not okay with this. My party is not allied to their party.
Yeah.
And I saw someone on social media essentially like compare it to like, imagine if someone from a foreign government had met with Trump or had met with Joe Biden and played a video of people shouting like, lock her up at a Trump rally and then said to Joe Biden, why is your party okay with this? Like, it just, again, it goes back to this notion that not only are these people cruel and like self-centered and self-interested, they're also incredibly ignorant of the world they're living in. And it just felt a lot like the Zelensky meeting, where it felt like Ramaphosa walked into it, who was there with like very well-meaning intentions, walked into an ambush.
Right, let's round up some other stories then. This story is one of the biggest of the week, really. So, Nikki, Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. What do we know so far about this, and how big a deal and issue has this felt around Washington and for you and your colleagues who report on this beat?
We know that Biden reportedly earlier this month was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, an advanced stage of cancer that, according to the reports that they put out, has metastasized into his bones. They claim that it's treatable, that the former president is in treatment. The reaction particularly in the context that the announcement was made, has been varied and intense. Um, on Tuesday, CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios' Alex Thompson published their much anticipated in Washington, D.C. book, Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. So the announcement, which was made last week, was made in the context of all of this PR that was happening for Tapper and Thompson's book. So it pretty immediately got attached to questions of how long have they actually known about the cancer diagnosis? Did it actually take place earlier this month? How, like, is it really possible for a cancer this aggressive to be undetected until it gets to stage 4? I'm not a doctor. Most of the people commenting on this are not a doctor. So I'm not going to speculate as to when and how or what Biden knew about this diagnosis. But I do think it revived a lot, like rightfully, it revived a lot of questions about whether or not Biden would have been fit to serve a second term, which the answer for some time now has been no.
I mean, with Original Sin, Nikki, I suppose that the attention it's getting, how much criticism has been leveled at Tapper for not just getting this out sooner? It does feel to me like a bit of a strange way to go about reporting news, to kind of know this stuff and wait to put it out in a book. Should this all have been out sooner? Do you think that's what's making people discuss Biden's cancer diagnosis in such a strange way, is because of this delayed reaction we've had to actually discussing his health in an objective way? Like, we weren't able to discuss his age in an objective way, and then his health also was just is wrapped up as if it was a bad thing to discuss for such a long time.
One of the mistakes I made in the 2024 election cycle, as much as I was, I think, publicly critical and questioning of Biden's decline, of being a little too credulous of what the White House was saying. And I do think it's valid to look into, to investigate, to talk to sources about what was actually going on within the White House. And it was a learning moment for me. There's articles I wrote where I mentioned it, oh, this kind of event and situation exacerbates concerns about Biden's cognitive abilities and his ability to continue serving a second term. For me, it was a lesson on not taking things at face value.
Sure.
And I haven't read the book yet. I want to, but I will say, and I think I've said this before, I hate, and I'm not saying that Tapper and Thompson did it because, again, I have not read the book. I detest the journalistic practice because I can't even call it a journalistic practice, the practice of holding on to scoops for over a year and a half longer so you can drop them in your book. And one of the things I will say, the election was how many months ago? 7? I don't think, the idea, what I know about this book is that it's based on 200 something interviews that Tapper and Thompson did in the aftermath of the election. So I don't think, anything here is stuff that they had, as far as I know, access to before the election that they held on to in order to publish the book. I think it's all stuff that they learned after the election. If I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll find out about eventually. But that's okay. I think a retrospective on an event that happened is fine. I think, yeah, the other criticism that I've heard made here is that people like Tapper could have been harder on the Biden administration during the election cycle, that people like Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper and tons of people in the media, it wasn't just them, were very hesitant to say Biden should step down. It was for a long time seen that no one wanted to be the first person to say that this was clearly not going to work and we needed to find a new candidate. No one wanted that smoke, that backlash. And so I wonder how much self-reflection is actually done in this book by either of them.
With that then, and the self-reflection side of it, how have Democrats been reacting?
I think the Original Sin stuff, there's been a lot of interviews. There's been a lot of discussion about it. I think most Democrats, institutional Democrats, lawmakers, they don't really want to talk about it. They don't want to wade into that swamp again. You've seen most of the critique I've seen has come from like Republicans on the left. I know obviously like Axios, CNN has been heavily promoting the book. There's been discussions about it. But I think the retrospective mea culpa is this is where we went wrong. I'm not seeing a ton of it. And I do think that's a reckoning journalists need to have as individuals. Journalistic outlets need to have as institutions about how this was handled and how do you prevent it from happening again? Because I've talked about it before. I fully believe Donald Trump is not within his faculties. And that's not just because I disagree with his politics. Like, the speech patterns, the ramblings, the, like, delusions. That, to me, also speaks of someone who is not in their right mind, who is not fully qualified. I think we're also in a similar but different situation as Biden, where Trump is the face of the operation, but really it's the people around him who are governing.
Chris, on the MAGA reactions to all of this then, conspiracies. That's been kind of that's their bread and butter. That's what they're into.
Bread and butter.
Don Jr., Donald Trump Jr.
That guy.
That fucking guy. Said he wants to run for president one day. That'd be good if we're still going. We can. Can't wait to talk about that fucking guy. But he kicked off these conspiracies, really, didn't he? And then Trump kind of started off nice, saying, sympathies, and then he sort of joined in.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
Conspiracies, that's what's going on.
Yeah. Conspiracies.
That's right. Trump Jr. said, I think the first thing you're referring to is he said this. He said, what I want to know is how did Dr. Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up? By the way, Dr. Jill Biden, not a medical doctor.
No.
She has a doctorate in education, specifically educational leadership from the University of Delaware. So she's not performing any kind of cancer screenings, to be quite honest with you.
No, and I believe even if she did, I don't imagine she'd be doing it at home daily for her husband.
No, she definitely wouldn't. And also, stage 5 metastatic cancer doesn't exist. It's not a real thing.
Oh, okay.
It's two complete misses there.
Think of how much money Trump fucking wasted on that guy's education.
It's incredible, isn't it? It really is quite incredible. But there's the thing. People will believe what he's saying. They won't look into the details. They'll be like, oh, he said that. I believe it now.
Yeah.
Well, that's like a whole thing on the right. The like doubting and denying that Jill Biden has a doctorate, or like dismissing her doctorate because it's a doctorate in education. And then and Don Jr. came back and was like, it's clear none of you understand how to take a joke. And it's like, dude, your joke is shit and you're shit. Like,
yeah. And then, as you say, Donald Trump, he started off quite nice, as you'd imagine, putting out a statement saying, get better soon, essentially. But then started wading in and saying, I think he said things like, I'm surprised people didn't find out sooner. And also, I think he said, someone isn't telling all of the facts here, which obviously is going to stir up a whole load of conspiracy, and that's exactly what we've seen, really.
Well, then he did a big rambling post as well, sort of suggesting that Biden was a puppet president entirely.
Yeah, I mean,
which I don't know. There's some thinking, as Nikki said, that I'm sure but Trump's a bit like a puppet president, so it's a little bit of it's a two-sided thing. Like, sure, like maybe there are questions to raise that Biden wasn't fully in charge of everything that was going on because he wasn't up to the job. But that is happening with Trump now, and maybe his big rambling post on Truth Social wasn't a very nuanced way of discussing that.
Well, it never is. I don't know if you've been on Truth Social.
Oh, I have. The adverts are so shit.
It's very difficult to keep up with everything on Truth Social. Hence why I don't really go on it. But even though people have been explaining this, it hasn't stopped people from going after her. Still, I think it was Leo Terrell. He's a Fox contributor.
He's a Fox News guy.
He's the worst.
Like, look, they pay me to do this. If you're not getting paid to do this, do not get in social media arguments with these idiots. Like, it's not worth your time.
What I don't understand about Terrell is that he's also a Justice Department official. He shouldn't really be wading into these things. But a quote from him was
There's
that
a lot of things this government shouldn't be doing, Chris.
that's very true. But I still struggle to believe it. I struggle to believe that this is real life, but it is, and that's why we talk about it. But one of his quotes was he was basically saying that Jill Biden should face criminal charges for elder abuse. And he said this on social media. He said, she knew about President Biden's health problems, but still wanted him to run for president, full stop. Evil. There's no, it's worth saying, there's absolutely zero evidence of Jill Biden knowing about this as we speak.
Yeah.
As we speak, there's zero evidence. We haven't seen anything like that. So what we're seeing at the moment really is it's pure politics to discredit the Democratic Party, I guess.
Nikki, as well as these conspiracy theories, there's some other big conspiracy world news happening at the moment. Bongino and Kash Patel, they've been getting shit over Jeffrey Epstein. So, yeah, just give me what the fuck is going on these two things.
Yeah, so Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, which, like, what the fuck? Came out and said that he'd seen the files and Jeffrey Epstein totally killed himself. But, like, you know that the right absolutely does not believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. They believe that despite the fact that Donald Trump was president at the time that this happened, that Hillary Clinton had Jeffrey Epstein murdered and blah 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 blah. Again, we're dealing with a very very special cohort of people here. Why would you tweet that? Like if you know what your base is like and you know the frothing mass of red meat chewing like sycophants that make up your audience, why do this? All it does is lead to exactly what happened, which is accusations against Kash Patel and Dan Bongino that they've been like co-opted by the deep state and that they've just been, they've transferred to the opposition. Really, you didn't have to touch this situation. Pam Bondi was already taking all of the shit over the like half-ass Epstein files dump they did a couple months ago, where it turned out it was just a bunch of stuff that was already in the public docket. And she was like, oh, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Like, again, use your brain. Why would you take that shitstorm on yourself? Just let her deal with it.
Yeah. Just pass it on. Well,
I hate it because I would be so much better at being a baby fascist than all of these people, and they're so fucking stupid. Like,
there's time to pivot. Let's just see. So support us on patreon.com/American Friction to stop our right-wing pivot, is what I would say. A final thing we want to talk about, and this is a serious one. Ruth Lopez, Nikki, can you just quickly talk me through who she is and what's going on with her?
Yeah. So if listeners will remember, a couple weeks ago, we did an episode about the situation in El Salvador's prisons with Noah Bullock of Cristo Sal, a human rights group in El Salvador and Central America that has been really involved in helping families of people who've been disappeared into El Salvador's prison system. They've been extremely critical of the Bukele regime, and they've also provided a lot of advice to the families of American deportees to El Salvador's prisons. So like people like they're not directly involved with the Quilmar Abrego Garcia case, but they've advised families who are in a similar situation. On Sunday night, the Bukele government arrested Ruth Lopez, who is Cristo Sal's lead attorney in their anti-corruption division. She is a world-renowned anti-corruption and human rights lawyer. She was named one of the BBC's 100 most influential women in the world last year. They are accusing her of embezzlement under evidence that has not been provided to the public. I've spoken to Noah from Cristo Sal about this. I wrote it up for Rolling Stone. She was actually one of the people I interviewed for an article I did around the same time we interviewed Noah about the conditions in El Salvador's prisons. But she got a knock on her door Sunday night. 2 cops are there. They told her there was a car crash on the street. We think it was your car. Can you come out and verify if it's your vehicle? And once she came out of the house, they were like, "You're under arrest for embezzlement."
Is that
Her
not
family,
entrapment?
yeah, no, straight up. But like, it's the Bukele government. They act with impunity. They basically disappeared her for over 24 hours. They told her family she was being detained in one place. When they got there, they were like, "Oh, she's not here." They wouldn't tell them where she was. It took like over, I think, 36, 48 hours for them to actually be able to see her and make sure she was okay. And she, as of this recording, remains detained. So, we're putting the word out there. It like dozens of international human rights groups, including like Amnesty International, have condemned her detention. And I'm going to see if I can get Noah back on at some point to talk to us a little more about this.
Yeah, the work they do is very important, and Noah is very impressive. So yeah, we'll try and put a link in the show notes or something to what Chris Dessel does, and we'll definitely keep an eye on that situation. Let's get on to listener questions. We're running a little bit long today, so I think we've only got time for one. This is from Az Richards, who I met the other day, and it's Az.
Really?
I hadn't been pronouncing it correctly. Yes, we both saw Adam Buxton live on Buckles.
Don't promote other podcasts on this podcast.
You're allowed to, Buckles, a little
Well,
bit.
fair, yeah.
And I don't think I don't think we're gonna help Buckles.
You a podcat?
I am a podcast.
No, I used to be a podcat.
Oh, you dropped out?
Well, I've not listened to it for a while, but I liked it. No reason, just stopped.
Yeah, I just drop in and out occasionally,
Fair.
sort of thing. But yeah, went to see him live. It was quite funny. It was reasonably funny, I would say. But yeah, as Richards, pronouncing it correctly now. This question, she asks, is this one weird enough? Yes, I do believe. Do you have a rota for watching Fox News / listening to Joe Rogan / reviewing batshit conspiracy theories on Twitter to protect each other's sanity? A bit like Ron, Jarv, Chris, Harry, and Hermione, Nikki, wearing the Horcrux in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Wonder why you got...
I don't know. Why did I get Harry?
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, fair.
I'm all over it.
All time, yeah, of course. And I'll take Ron.
I mean,
Fine.
look, I wouldn't say it's a rota like sharing the Horcrux. I would agree that I am Hermione in the sense that I'm doing most of the mental lifting here.
Yeah, you do a lot of it. I'm still
But
on
I love
Twitter.
you're both like, that's the thing. I don't think it's a great comparison because I'm not sure either Harry or Ron can do math, and Chris is very good at doing the math.
You are good at maths, Chris.
No one's ever described
So yeah, we
that.
don't really have a formal sharing, do
No,
we?
yeah.
I mean,
It's a good idea.
I do go on Twitter,
Good
still,
job.
and
Good
I go
job.
on Truth Social still.
Yeah.
I try not to watch very much Fox News until the clips come through onto the feeds, but that's one of the reasons why I still have Twitter, is because they're more likely to sort of pop up there, and they pop up in an organic fashion, and I find that a maybe more interesting way to work out what the right wingers are actually talking about. Because when on Blue Sky, when right wing shit comes up, it's left wing people going, ha ha ha, look at this is stupid. Whereas on Twitter, it's right wing people being like, this is sick.
Yeah. Every now and then I dip into that website, patriot.win.
Oh, really?
Oh, God.
Which is just, it's quite strange.
Yeah.
But if you ever want to know what the people on the very far right are thinking, go there.
That's the place to go.
It's really weird, but also interesting at the same
all of
time.
it.
Yeah. Nikki's on 8chan because there's really good fan fiction there too.
Yeah.
That's right.
she's gone there.
No, I just like this is my
Pepe
my
the
day
Frog
every
fan
day.
fiction. That's what she's actually reading.
What?
Pepe the Frog fan fiction. Is that what you're really
Ew.
reading?
No, that's ew. I don't like amphibians. Disgusting.
Oh, hot take.
But
Slimy take.
But no, like I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is check my Slack, check sort of like the group chats I'm in, because usually big news stories will get flagged there, and Twitter is fucking unusable these days. And then I'll like scroll through Twitter for a bit. I'll read some newsletters. I like have political newsletters I'm subscribed to that'll like get me caught up on anything that I missed the night before, what I need to look for in the day. I have a program, Snapstream. It's wonderful. If you would like a free trial, see my Blue Sky profile. But it's a program that lets me like watch live and clip live television as I go, but it has a viewer that lets me watch 4 channels at once, and I can just toggle like between C-SPAN, Fox News, CNN, Fox Business, and I can just get a little bit of everything. And I'll keep that on throughout the day. And if I hear something insane, I'll flag it to my boss. I write like 3 to 4 articles a day. Wednesday nights, an hour before I go to bed, I look at the script and I give my edits, and then I show up here and record.
Yeah. Nikki normally has 4 Fox News up at the same time. Just all there.
Nice.
Just all different panels.
Just all Fox News. So yeah, basically, answer to that question is
No.
Nikki's brain is getting the most addled out of it.
It is quite addled.
Yeah. So that question was asked on our Patreon community chat, which you will have access to if you sign up to our £5 and above tier, which you should. So go and do it. It also gets you bonus content, doesn't it?
And it gets us eggs, beans, and grains as well.
Eggs, beans, and grains as well.
Do we get salt with that?
Not in our community.
Not in this economy.
We don't have access to the sea in that sort of way. And on that note, that brings us to the end of this episode of American Friction. Nikki, sincerely, thank you.
Thank you both. Love you all.
Love you too. Chris, less sincerely, thank you.
Why?
I don't know.
Why you got to do me like that, man?
Yeah, I know.
Jarv, thanks, mate.
That's all right. You're welcome. And for 1 week only, Robin. Thank you very much, Robin.
Thanks to Robin, yeah.
Is filling in for Simon. And thanks, Simon, still. Big up, Simon.
Big up, Simon.
Everyone on 3, say thank you, Simon. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Simon.
Simon.
So, that brings us to the end of this episode of American Friction. Thank you for all of you listening. We've already mentioned Patreon. I won't mention it again, but patreon.com/American Friction. I guess I did mention it again. If you can't support us financially, we get it. But do go subscribe. Subscribe right now and rate and review us wherever you're listening. I'm Jacob Jarvis. This is American Friction. It's going to keep being American Friction. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.